I have a special guest. Chip, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Who is that guy? I have no idea who he is.
That's my
Hey,
good, that's my good friend Ed.
how you doing, young man?
Good, good. I'm sorry you guys are getting my work logo, but didn't have time to turn it off.
Actually, we're seeing you live now. It's
Yeah,
okay.
good, good.
Yeah, yeah. This
It's
is
nice
my
to meet.
backyard.
It's nice to meet you, Chip.
Nice to meet you, Billy.
Sorry, Ed.
No, that's okay.
We've talked many times, right? We just have not met formally. We talk digitally, Ed. Billy runs a lot of good pictures that I'm always passing to all of our friends and family, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, since I have you two, we want to chat some Madison Cubs basketball. I wanted to invite Chip to kind of just say hi to you, Ed, and
No, that's great.
tis the season right now with March Madness and Hoosier Hysteria, and maybe Ed, you can start off saying what Chip's father meant to you, and Bud Ritter, a member of the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame, a fantastic basketball coach for the Madison Cubs, and list. I could go on and on and on, but Ed, chat about that a little bit.
Well, Bud had coached for a while and then he left and came back. And I was in the 8th grade when he announced that Bud was going to be the new Madison Cub coach. And when you're a kid growing up in Madison, Indiana, and you play basketball and your dream was to go play for the Madison Cubs, and all of a sudden we heard this guy, Bud Ritter, was coming back. Well, I didn't know who Bud Ritter was because I was too young. I think I was in the 1st or 2nd grade or 2nd or 3rd grade when he left. But all I know was this guy knew basketball. And when we walked into a gym playing with Bud as our coach, we always felt like we had a shot at winning because he was you just felt better about life being around Bud. He was just bigger than life, always had a funny story, always had an encouraging word to say. And Bud had a way of making you want to play harder than you thought you could possibly play. But he never really yelled at you. He never really was mean to anybody. You just wanted to play hard for him because you wanted to do your best to honor coach. That's all. And I will tell you, let me tell you about the Ritter family before we go any further. First of all, the honor that I had to play for Bud was a great thrill because a Hall of Fame coach and a master tactician and a great scouting. I'll tell you some stories about his scouting thing a little later. But when we went in to play a game, we knew the plays they were going to run before they ran them. And we knew what we were going to do. And we'd go in at halftime and we'd make adjustments. We'd come out and all of a sudden we'd score 10 points and the game's over, start the first 2 minutes of the 3rd quarter. But Mrs. Ritter was a teacher at high school and she taught speed reading. So I was in her speed reading class. Chip has an older brother. The oldest son's named Dwight Ritter, trial lawyer in San Diego, lives down in Coronado. One of my closest, dearest friends ever. Just a great guy. And love his family. And then had a sister named Julia, and Julia was maid of honor in my wedding in 1975. And then they had another sister named Mimi, who was a cheerleader on the basketball program. And then Steve, there's a brother named Steve, who was about 3 years younger than me, I think. And he was always hanging around in the shadows, playing basketball with us and always part of the group, and just a fun guy to be around. And then there was a daughter named Beth who unfortunately died in a fire in the mid 70s somewhere on an Indian reservation. And it's just a great loss. And then Chip comes along, and when we'd ride on the team buses to all these games, Chip would usually sit with me in one of the seats because he didn't take up much space and I could spread out and sleep a lot. And it was a lot of fun. So the Ritter family has been indelibly entwined in my family's life over the years and had a huge influence on us, just beyond basketball, even to the extent of just life. And even today, my kids call Dwight Uncle Dwight.
So
they're
I see you.
Ma-
I'm sorry, Chip. Go ahead.
No, I said Madison basketball is a little bit like a band of brothers, right? So, we're, didn't matter who your coach was. From generation to generation, I think from the early late 40s to today, I think they all associate with each other almost as if they're related in a weird way. Ed knows because he grew up on the river near the Ohio River playing basketball at Crystal Beach, where kids from Kentucky came over and played us because they were a stone's throw away. And Jeffersonville, New Albany would drive up and play us.
Yep.
And
North
we'd all
Vernon.
play outside at the Crystal Beach court. And when it got too cold and rainy, we'd go to the Live White Boys Club and play in there.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Ed, where are you at currently right there? What beautiful background is that?
Oh, I live in Scottsdale, Arizona. It's got a condo made of stona right out here. No, I sat here in my backyard just to irritate most of my friends back in Indiana because it's very nice time here. It's a little cloudy. Usually it's clear blue skies. I'm kind of addicted to clear blue skies, but today's a little off.
And how about you, Chip?
Hit the wrong button. I live in Zionsville, Indiana, right outside of Indianapolis. Still in the heartbeat of America here, right? The heartbeat of basketball anyway. And we lived in Chicago for about 25 years and moved here about 8 years ago.
Hey, Billy.
And of course,
Chip has a son.
2 boys from high school.
Chip has a son that's a pretty good player, plays for Zionsville, named Dylan. You want to talk? Ask him about his son. And I don't have to talk the rest of the show. You guys, he can talk the rest of the show about Dylan.
No, no, I moved my boys about 8 years here from Chicago, so they didn't know what they were getting into, right? So we've been in the AAU ranks and in the high school ball that was brought back all these great memories. And most importantly, we get to go around the whole state and play in these gyms that my dad coached in. That
Yeah.
Ed and I and my brother Dwight or my brother Steve played in, and Dwight told the story about Kokomo when I was at Kokomo this year against Zionsville. I hadn't been in Kokomo for a long time, but they have these 4 pillars that are run around the outside. And Dwight said the last time I was there was 60 years ago. And he was 10 years old. And he said that they tried to get tickets, and the athletic director and the coach or whoever they called to get tickets said we're sold out. And they put them behind the pillar, and so that Dad couldn't scout Kokomo that game because he couldn't see. And so he said that he went to the locker room after the game and gave the coach a hard time. And he said, I didn't do that. And the media was there and ended up writing an article in the Star about it, saying that they blocked Dad from scouting. So anyway, I get to go to a lot of gyms that have a lot of memories and stories like that.
Well, this show was originally going to be Ed is going to tell us all stories, and I was going to interview Ed. I wanted to bring you in, Chip, and I wanted to talk. I wanted you to see Ed see Chip, and just fill me in a little bit about Madison Cubs basketball, because I made the mistake one time of putting Anderson in front of Madison, and I still get death threats about that.
Well, it was from the Anderson fans, though, not the Madison fans, I'm sure, right?
Yeah. That the basketball has definitely changed in the state of Indiana. Yeah, the small towns aren't as prevalent in the top 10 as they used to be, and the Anderson now has 1 high school versus 3.
Oh, wow.
And nowhere near the and I think it's partially due to the big cities are getting the AAU teams and getting the AAU programs to build skills and build competitive teams, and it's hard for the small towns and across the state to build the competitiveness that they used to. That's why I think the big Louisville and Fort Wayne and Indianapolis are really a stronghold for great teams these days. But in the old days, the Andersons and the Muncies and Marions and all those were so dominant, right, in the old days.
Uh,
It's a little harder.
Ed, there was no AAU when you were playing basketball. What was tell the youngsters that are watching what I mean you went around to other people's courts. I'm assuming you probably had a hoop on your house yourself as your with your family.
Well, there was a school called Eggleston Elementary School, and it had one basketball goal. And instead of having the recessed pole, the pole went straight up and down, and the backboard attached straight to the pole. So when you'd go down the lane, you'd have to twist your body to avoid the pole, or otherwise you'd have a collision in midair with this big steel pole. But Chip alluded to Crystal Beach earlier. We were fortunate enough that in Madison, we had a lot of great players ahead of us. So guys like Willie Humes, who's in the Hall of Fame, Larry Humes, who's Mr. Basketball, Donnie Firth, Buster Bradley, Larry Shingleton, all these guys. And then Hanover College was right next door. So in the summertime, we could go down there at any given night and there'd be 25 guys waiting to play. And Willie would come home from college, and a guy named Bob Wolf, who played at Brevard Junior College in Asheville, North Carolina, and Pat Shawm was a guy that played at University of Texas in Arlington. And all these guys would come home, and we'd go down there as a high school kid, and you wanted to play against these big college guys, right? And a guy named John Musil, who was a tremendous player at Shaw, Madison Shaw, and went to Hanover College. We'd go down there and we'd have great games. And like he talked about, a guy named Dave Miller, who was an Kentucky All-Star, Carrollton, Kentucky, and went to UK and then eventually transferred to Marshall. He was a 6'8" guy, tremendous player. And we would have these tremendous games down there at Crystal Beach. And you played till you lost, and if you win, you kept playing. If you lost, you had to sit out and come back again. And you didn't want to lose.
My brother Steve used to say, you always wanted one of the Humes guys on your team.
Exactly.
You always get to play again. And if you had Willie on your team, you'd always get to play.
Exactly. Willie averaged something like 39 points a game at Idaho State his senior year. He was third in the nation behind Pete Maravich, Calvin Murphy, and then I think Willie was the third leading scorer in the country that year.
Yeah, Billy, you may want to do research on this. I don't know if this is true, but my dad always used to say that he thought that the Humes brothers as a family should be in the Guinness Book of World Records for the most points in a family. Now, I don't know if that's a true statement or not, but I know this, that when he was inducted as a coach in the Hall of Fame, I remember at the down at the Indianapolis Convention Center, the first thing he did when he stood up for his speech was he had Mrs. Humes stand up. And he said, okay, Mrs. Humes, please stand up. And he said, this is the reason why I'm being inducted into the Hall of Fame.
That was Bud. That was Bud.
You know, I'm an Indianapolis city boy. I went to Broad Ripple High School. Before I got to the Broad Ripple area, I was in Hallville, which is right down the road from the Indianapolis 500. So I got to see a lot of the Washington Continentals play in our backyard on the garage that if you blew on it would fall down. Tell me what growing up in Madison and then that area was like, and compared to a big city boy.
You want me to answer that? Well, do you want Chip? Chip, go ahead.
Ed should answer that, being a downtown river rat.
Well, in Madison back then, it seemed like none of us knew it, but we were all poor. And we just had a chance to compete, and basketball was the great equalizer. So when you walked out on the basketball court at Madison, nobody cared who your dad was or how much money you had or what kind of house you had. It was pure meritocracy. You went out on the court and you could play, and if you could play, you were going to get playing time, and you had a chance to go to college. And my dad told me in the 8th grade, he said, Eddie, I can't afford to send you to college, but he said, you're a pretty good player, and if you work hard at it, I bet you could get a basketball scholarship. And I was stunned because my dad never said anything nice to me in my whole life up until then. And I'm looking at like, well, gosh, if my dad thinks I'm a pretty good player, I must be pretty good. So then I got to play for Bud. And the great thing about Bud was that he just instilled confidence in you. My senior year, we went in to play the first game of the year, and Bud said, boys, we can't go undefeated if we don't win the first game. And I'm looking around thinking, he thinks we could go undefeated. Huh. Nobody told us that before, right? And we were just a bunch of guys that were immature knuckleheads, but we loved to play, and we were coachable, and coach knew how to take advantage of opportunities that presented himself. And so the great thing about growing up in Madison, Indiana is there's a guy named Jordan Peterson, who's a psychologist, professor, lecturer, who talks about, he looked around one day and he noticed that a lot of people in positions of leadership around the country were from small towns. And if you think about it, you might be the best basketball player in Madison, Indiana. You're probably not going to be the best basketball player in New York City or Chicago. So it's a very small number. But in a small town, you have opportunities to be successful at an early age. So by the time I was in high school, I knew what success looked like. And I knew it was based on meritocracy and hard work and putting up thousands of jump shots every year to Brown Gym and to Crystal Beach, and hours and hours and hours of honing your craft, and to make yourself a shooter, or to make yourself to run the steps out of Clifty Falls for conditioning, and run up and down Michigan Road, Telegraph Hill. You know, it was just an opportunity that if you wanted it bad enough, it presented an opportunity for you to go get a chance to make something for yourself and to become somebody. And we had plenty of models for that. Buster Briley, Larry Humes, Willie Humes, Bugsy Humes, Larry Shingleton, Bob Orrell, Ed Orrell, Dee Monroe, Bill Lodge. There's a lot of great players, Don Server, a lot of great players over the year come out of Madison, Indiana. And they were all guys that just had a chance to compete and took advantage of that opportunity. And I think it gave us an opportunity to be successful at an early age, which helps. Success begets success. And that was just got a call there. So success begets success, and it allowed us at an early age to have a chance to dream big dreams and to be able to do things that we didn't know we could do even.
Chip, you want to toss something in?
Yeah, there was. I agree with that. There was a belief that you could definitely do more due to basketball, right? And it was you were hungry for it, so it was fun. We had a lot of fun playing basketball in Madison, and there are a lot of success stories that have gone on beyond basketball, right? So in Indiana, we have one of the top 10 all-time leading winningest coaches, Mike Brown, right? Ed, you
he's
with Mike.
He's an Eggleston boy. He's an Eggleston boy.
That's right. Yeah, so it depends on what school you went to, who's going to support you. But Eggleston guys, yeah, they stick up for each other a little bit more than the Liddy Middleton kids do.
Well, Mike Brown will be in the Hall of
Mike
Fame
Brown
someday.
is one of the top 10. That's right. And Gary O'Neill. And so Gary O'Neill's another one who played at Madison. He's in the Hall of Fame for baseball coaching, and was an assistant coach for my dad, as well as one of the great baseball coaches in the history of Indiana as well. So another great success story. And then of course recently passed away is Spence Snyder, who was a famous lawyer and a grad of Yale. But he grew up on the streets of Madison playing as well. And, there's a ton of stories just like that.
Ed, when I met you via phone, this is where we chatted about doing an interview. And I know I'm going to have to chat with you about doing one-on-one. I apologize for
that's all right.
Tossing the excitement on you, but I thought this would be fun. But, you were on the phone, and you were telling me the stories of, basketball in Indiana and going up against teams. And you also introduced me to a gentleman that you called Lake, and Howard Lakeman. And what really touched my heart, and I knew that there was no way in hell I was going to be able to get just one show in 1 hour of you. I was going to have to do multi-parts. for this show is I heard you get choked up for your love for Lake. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, if I don't cry. Harold Pee Wee Lakeman played for Bud, and I think he graduated, I want to say 58 or 59 or something like that. And he didn't get to play very much till his senior year, because he was on the team with Buster Briley and Larry Singleton and Jack Waters and all those guys that are, legendary players. And but he became a reporter and a statistician, and he wrote a book called the Madison Cub Chronicle, which he published in 1966. And it was a page on every single basketball team in Madison that it had at that point. And Lake is a guy, he used to work at the boys club, and he used to run the parks department. And he's just a legend in Madison, Indiana, as a guy at every basketball game. He knows the stat. He has all the records for everybody that ever played. He probably has every scorebook back to who knows how far back. And he's compiled the data, and he's sort of the keeper of the legends, if you will, of the history of Madison Cub basketball. Huge fan of Bud Ritter, huge fan of Ed Orrell. By the way, Ed Orrell was the assistant coach to Mr. Ritter the whole time I played, and they were together several years. And Bud was the outside guy, and Ed Orrell was the inside guy. And he didn't want the outside, but Bud loved that part. So the two of them were like, it was an awesome combination of coaching and strategy and insight and knowledge of the game. And they just think about what kind of guy wants to grow up and put his livelihood in the hands of a bunch of high school boys, right? I mean, how sick is that? That your success and your win-loss record is dependent on a bunch of knuckleheads running around filled with testosterone, thinking they're all the best player in the world. And having the confidence and egos to take the shot and want the ball in a big circumstance like that. And yet, those are the guys that help fashion the lives of us. But Lake is one of those guys that every kid growing up, you knew who Pee Wee was. And he has a great Damon Bailey story. He worked down in Jeffersonville with the city of Jeffersonville for a while for Mayor Dale Orem, I think it was. And Damon came into town to speak to the Lions Club or Rotary Club or something. And Lake played him in a game of horse. And apparently Lake beat Damon Bailey in a game of horse. And Lake tells this story 5,000 times. I've heard it 6,000 times. But and somebody asked Damon about it one time. And he goes, "Yeah, I'm tired of hearing about that daggone Lakeman beat me in horse. Everywhere I go, people from Madison, did Lakeman really beat you in horse?" But he's just one of those guys that just infectious love of life and a wonderful friend and a guy that has a heart the size of New Jersey and would do anything for anybody. And a dear friend of mine, and his birthday is always leap day. So I call him every year for the last 45 years and say happy birthday or close to it. But yeah, Lake is and Chip knows Lake too. Chip, you probably have a Lake story you want to tell.
No, I just know that we need someone to remember everything, and he must have a photographic memory of some sort, because he always has the data, right?
Yeah, instant recall.
And he used to drive me to the Hall of Fame banquet when Dad had to go up a day or two early. Pee Wee and I would drive together to all the Hall of Fame banquets or the Hall of Fame Classic, right? So yeah. I think we've ridden to a few games together in our past.
Ed, where did you want to go to college? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just said I don't remember what year Pee Wee, what years Pee Wee played, Ed. That was back in the late 50s, right?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah. So Billy, to answer your question, where did I want to go? The girl that I married, name was Carol Wallace, and she was a year older than me in high school, and she went to Miami of Ohio, up in Oxford, Ohio. And a guy named Daryl Hester, I think was his last name, was the head coach there. And that doesn't sound right. Jerry Walters maybe was the other guy that was the assistant coach. But I wanted to go to Miami of Ohio in the worst way because my girlfriend was there. And they scouted me 3 times, and the first game was against Billy Harmon and Danny Brown at North Vernon. And I had a really good game, like 26 points, and we beat those guys. And second game, I had a pretty good game. And they came a third time. It was at Connorsville. And we got beat like 90-54. It's the worst game we ever lost in my whole career. And I fouled out in the third quarter. I think I had like 6 points. It's the only game all year I didn't score in and much. And but they came to me and said, look, we have 3 players. We got 2 players ahead of you. We got 2 spots open. We're going to offer both those guys. But if one of those guys doesn't take the spot, then it's yours. So both of those guys took the spot, and I did not get to go to Miami of Ohio. Daryl Hedrick, that was the guy's name. Sorry, Daryl Hedrick was the coach. And so I didn't go there. So I ended up being recruited by DePaul University in Greencastle, Indiana, and went there and had a great year there. Then I transferred and finished at Hanover College down in Hanover, and played 1 year. Then I got married after that, my sophomore year in 1975. I was madly in love with this little redheaded girl.
You know, this is a show about keeping the nostalgia alive and documenting the past so the future can remember. And but I'm going to say something on a personal level here, that nobody really knows what each of us go through mentally, physically. And I know that it was just an anniversary of losing that beautiful woman also. Can you tell us a little bit about her, Ed?
Yeah. She died on May the 5th last year. So I just celebrated our first year. We had a celebration of her life with my family on Friday night. And so Carol's best friend was Julia Ritter, Chip's sister. And they sat in the chair block, and they sat in the very under the basket in the Madison chair block. The girls' chair block was the north end of the gym. And for those of you who are not from Indiana or maybe don't know this, Madison's a town of about 12,000 people, and the gymnasium seats 5,500. And every year that we were playing, that thing was sold out every night. There was never an empty seat. People standing around, standing room only to get in, because you didn't have ESPN, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have cable TV. And that was a social event of the year, of the whole season, was Friday and Saturday night to go to a basketball game and hang out with your family and your friends. And it was just a wonderful experience. But this girl named Carol Wallace sat right underneath the cheer block, and we're playing Southwestern, who's our arch rival, my junior year, and it's Thanksgiving Eve, and I'm at the foul line, and I was an 80% free throw shooter. I never missed, basically. And they hand me the ball, and I look up at her and I winked at her as I shot my free throw. And then I shot it and I clanged it and I missed. And Julia turns to Carol and said, "Did he just wink at you?" And she said, "Yeah, he did. And he missed." So I didn't wink anymore. I made the next one. But the funny thing was, I had a date with a girl named Sue Watson that we went to the dance with that night. And so I winked at Carol, but I'd gone to the date with Sue Watson, and Sue and I dated for a couple of weeks thereafter. Then Carol and I started dating right after the new year. So it was her senior year and my junior year. And it was, she was just an amazing woman. We were married for 44 and a half years, and just a godly woman, a great mother, and a heart that everybody loved. And if you ever met Carol, you would know what a sweetheart looks like. So I was blessed to be married to the greatest woman of all time, frankly.
And all of Ed's kids are smart and good looking, and they got it all from Carol.
Amen to that. Except Kendall got my height and my jump shot. Everything else he got from Carol.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I'll give you that. Ed.
Well, one of them. One out of all the traits, the height and the jump. Well, two. I did teach her how to shoot. So, Billy, what you need to know is my daughter, Kendall, was Miss Basketball for the state of Ohio in 2009. And at her high school, they won 4 straight high school Division I championships, which are the largest schools in Ohio. And she was MVP in the state championship game as a freshman, sophomore, and senior. And then had a great career at Northwestern. She was all Big Ten a couple of times, all freshman team, and scored like 1,600 points, had 800 rebounds, and graduated with a 3.5 from Northwestern. So she was quite an accomplished player in her own right.
And lives in Arizona
For
currently,
sure.
right?
and lives in Scottsdale. In fact, she just called me a minute ago. That's why I had to decline her call to stay on here. I'll call her in a few minutes. Yeah, but she was
I can tell you this. If Dad were coaching, she'd have played at Madison. I can tell you that.
one of my friends said, Ed, she better than you were. And I said, well, that's 100% true. She's a lot better than I was.
Yeah,
So-
Ed knows that Pee Wee and everyone might tell us this. Most of the stories are how Dad got people to come to Madison and play. So, there's lots of stories around how you could always find somebody a job, or we could figure out a way to get a good basketball player to move in.
Yeah.
Right. The
Nobody
good
ever
old days.
Nobody ever complained either.
That's right. That's right. Somebody said that Phil Cole found Buster Briley out in the country somewhere and brought him in or something like that. I don't know that story, Ed. You know it.
Well, we'll let Buster tell him sometime. He can tell that story.
Yeah, Phil Cole, who was, by the way, worked for ABC's Wide World of Sports, was Dad's freshman coach for many years. And ultimately, he was a racing commentator in Indianapolis for many years. His name, again, was Phil Cole. And his claim to fame was that he found Buster Briley and brought him to Madison to play. So we'll have to prove that with Buster sometime.
Well, he was also a dear family friend of ours. My mom lived right across the street from him growing up. And the other guy that lived across the street was Ray Green, whose son was Steve Green in RT. So they're Madison, their mom and dad, their dad's from Madison and grew up on Walnut Street, right across the street from my mom and right across from Phil Cole. My first job ever was carrying coal buckets up out of the basement for Phil's mom and dad, Mr. and Mrs. Cole. It was he was a reporter, wrote for the Madison Courier, and it was a commentator, or he had an announcer for WRX. Used to broadcast our games in high school on WRX radio in Madison. Wonderful man.
Yeah, and I wasn't born yet, I don't think, when Buster hit the long shot against Notre Dame at University of Evansville, Robert Stadium, where they plugged the spike into the court to prove that it's the longest shot in history or whatever to win a game. And I guess Buster hit it and immediately ran through the doors into the locker room after it was over. And Buster told us this story at my house. I think he told us this story after the funeral.
Yes, he did.
And he said, your dad always told me to be humble when I get in front of the camera. So he said, I ran to the locker room after I hit the shot. We win the game. That I ran to the locker room and I waited for them to come in and interview me. And he said, when they interviewed me, they said, Buster, that was an amazing shot. They said, so what were you thinking when you shot it? He said, oh, I was actually meant to bank it. I meant to, bank it. And so, they laughed and so on. And so he said, that's all I could do was make fun of myself a little bit, and follow Mr. Ritter, Coach Ritter's advice of staying humble. So anyway, Buster's always saying funny things. He told my brother one time after the funeral that they said, Buster, what would it have been like if you'd had the 3-point line? And he said, Dwight, I wish they'd have had a 4-point line.
That's right.
So he I think I never got to play with him or watch him, but Ed, you may have, and they say that his shooting range is pretty far out.
Well, I think he was open in the parking lot, actually. When he got out of the car, he was open.
And my neighbor is Kathy Sloan Wood, and Brian Sloan. There's kids play with my kids in Zionsville, and I was fortunate enough to meet Jerry Sloan with them one day. And Jerry told me that one of the most aggressive, best basketball players that he's ever played with was Larry Humes. Said one of the best peer scorers and defenders I've ever played with, but he said one of the greatest shooters I've ever played with is Buster Briley.
Buster Briley.
So, he played with both of those guys at University of Evansville when they won 2 national championships, Division II. And the story is that there was a commitment to Adolph Rupp and to for I believe it was Buster or Larry. I can't remember.
It was
the
Buster.
story exactly.
It was Buster. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Dad had actually Buster signed the commitment to play at Kentucky, and that was his junior year. And Dad had to go and meet with Adolph and convince him that that they needed to rip that contract up because it was illegal to commit that early. And so ultimately, what ended up happening was he ended up playing at Evansville, where Dad's from, of course, and Larry ended up playing there too, right? So together, they were obviously one of the greatest Division II teams in the history of the game. But I think they beat every Division I team they played, right? From what I hear.
Yeah, I think they did.
So pretty
Guys,
remarkable record at University of Evansville.
Guys, this is this was prompt 2. I enjoy chatting with both of you. It's nice to meet both of you. Ed, I'm going to have to call you afterwards, set up another time so we can sit and chat. I apologize for throwing you a curveball and surprising you.
I love Chip. He's part of my family, so that's not a problem at all. When my daughter played at Northwestern, when they lived out in Naperville, those guys would come out and watch her play in the Big Ten. It was awesome.
And I also need to probably chat with Chip more.
Well, we have lots of Madisonians. There you go. We have lots of Madisonians to turn you on to.
But I appreciate you both being with me, and thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.